And what you, Professor Nigel Bigger, a very small number of other academics have been doing is to be inserting this information into the debate, facts, interpretations of it, which seem just not to have been put in for a very long time, certainly not in the academic field. So you mentioned, I mean, there are sort of positives about colonialism, there are negatives. What were the positives, in your view, for peoples in the countries that Europeans went to and ruled?
Well, I think we need to start at a very high level of abstraction, because the fundamental thing is this, is if you were in a society which had a Stone Age level of technological development, had no fixed borders, had no institutionalized system of governance, had not yet discovered the wheel, or in some more advanced places, nonetheless, still lived in an essentially feudal system, right, with a very entrenched elite and a very impoverished population. And you had the opportunity to be ruled by an advanced European civilization, right? Why would you not want that to happen, right? So just at the level of abstraction, like Civilization A, which is superior to Civilization B, and I have no problems using the term superior.
I was going to say, lots of people, the moment you say superior, they're going to...
Absolutely superior, right? Because superior in the sense of better technology, better healthcare, better education, more accountable governance, more rights for marginalized communities, especially women, urban development, technology, transportation, life-saving research and science, right? Those are the things I mean. This is superior, right? And there's no objective distinction between that and what's less. If you had that opportunity, what would your society do? Of course, they would jump at the opportunity, which is why so much of European imperialism spread with as much pull as it did push, right? Indeed, the pull factors are often the dominating ones. The British went to Ghana. They said not much interested, left. The Ghanaian kings demanded that they come back, begged them to come back. Finally, they did, signed the treaties. Why? Because British Empire or other empires brought security, it brought stability, it brought opportunities. It brought an end to intertribal warfare, which in many cases, these kings and these tribal leaders recognized was destroying their societies, right? They needed essentially a hegemon. I mean, it's an old Hobbesian story, but that's what they needed. So, you know, at a very high level of abstraction, right, I think that the onus of proof is that colonialism didn't bring tremendous benefits, right? I mean, just in the sense of the logic of a more superior, I mean, you don't have to use superior, more developed, right, more advanced civilization, having an opportunity to rule a less advanced civilization is so patently obvious, right? That the burden of proof that this was not a good thing, I think, lies upon those who say this somehow brought harms. And I think that's where we then have to get into, okay, so it's a good idea in general, right? Was it a good idea in practice, right? Now, this is where we need to talk about like how it rolled out. Places were better, places were worse. There were abuses here, not here. I mean, now we get into what used to be the debate on colonialism, which is let's talk about the practical opportunities, feasibility of things that were done well, things were done badly in particular contexts. But you know, this idea of a blanket condemnation is just not tenable.
I suppose there's two things that the anti-colonialists say at this point, which is, first of all, that there are maybe technical advances and so on, but that two things occur with colonialism. One is the presumption that there are people who are sort of morally better going into less morally developed societies. And the other one would be something along the lines of you're instituting a form of inequality, and along the lines of that, you're also, for instance, eradicating local cultures, local norms. You're replacing local norms with European norms. What do you say to those claims?
All of them don't withstand scrutiny. Again, the idea of a moral superiority is one thing that was distinctly absent in the European mission. If you take the idea of the civilizing mission seriously, right, what it implies is the moral potential, right, of those you are colonizing to be exactly like you. That was very explicit, right? And in terms of life-saving medicines being morally superior to the absence of life-saving medicines, yeah, I have no problems going to the mat and saying that's morally superior. It's morally superior to save lives, to prevent people from being killed through violent conflicts, to give rights to people who are traditionally marginalized, that's morally superior. I have no problem with that. Most liberals would argue that too, except when you talk about it in the context of colonialism. Second of all, in terms of foreign norms or alien norms, don't forget, almost all the places that were colonized were already under alien rule. But it was indigenous alien rule, not European alien rule.
And we're talking mainly here about Africa.
Well, most places. I mean, look at the Malay Peninsula, right? I mean, basically, the Malay Peninsula was a bunch of small fiefdoms, small sultanates, right? Those sultanates expanded or contracted based upon their power, right, and brought in people who had been under another sultanate. So, I mean, the idea of like indigenous rule, I mean, what is indigenous rule in a context in which the world has always been organized by empires spreading as far as they can, and when they weaken, being subjugated by other empires? It is, you're right, most explicitly clear in Africa, because you can actually see what was happening at the time of European conquest. I mean, the Fulani slave empire, which was basically an Islamic caliphate of the central part of the Sahara, was spreading towards West Africa when the British came in. The reason why it was so easy for the British to establish their control in northern Nigeria was because those groups recognized the choice was British imperialism or the Fulani slave empire. And the British Empire started to look very attractive compared to that. Third point, destroying local cultures. European imperialism was famous for its discovery and documentation and celebration of local cultures. Many of these languages would not have survived had not usually not the colonial administrators, but the explorers and the linguists and academics and researchers who came with imperialism gone and documented those languages.
Like the lost languages of India.
I mean, the U language of Togo was essentially rescued by the Germans after they colonized it. And there was 2 or 3 German linguists who went out, documented those languages before they were lost, created dictionaries, created study guides. I mean, the entire language would not exist but for German colonialism.
It's to say with James Princip and the language in India.
Right, yeah, the British rediscovery of Indian heritage is well known, right? I mean, I don't need to document it, but the Asiatics and the Orientalists, right, were the ones who rescued and saved these cultures from destruction, either by an indigenous empire or just by the forces of modernization, right? Like Swahili was spreading in East Africa, it was going to be the hegemonic language. If the Germans had not documented those languages in the Mount Kilimanjaro area, those languages would have been lost.